Let's see the action, starting with round 1 at Blandford Forum.
We'll be concentrating on 6 categories, usually spread over 3 races at each event, starting with the juniors. That's the 16 to 18-year-olds. This is a category with a huge range of abilities, from those just starting out in mountain biking to those who have been competing in one sport or another for a number of years. They can often give the professionals a run for their money, and if you stood beside them you wouldn't believe they were only 18. But what gives them away is the way they behave. In atrocious conditions, with the bikes hardly rideable, Richard Thackeray took an early and decisive lead, no doubt benefiting from his cyclocross background. The faster you went, the less mud stuck, so you could keep going where others failed. No, it's not fair. By the end of the race, Richard had opened a clear lead over his nearest challenger, Sam Humphrey. Sam was showing that last year's end-of-season form was not a flash in the pan, as he too opened a big gap on the next rider, local lad Nigel Parkinson. Did Richard ride most of the climbs?
First lap I did, but then it was getting too hard. You just couldn't push big enough gear to get you up.
What about the competition?
Left him for dead. Didn't see much of it.
Next race off, and always the largest field, is the Sportsmen. This year sponsored by Animal. Early leaders were Glenn Turner, the 1990 Observed Trials champion. That's where you hop over rocks and the like without putting your foot down, with Scott Robinson in second in his first year out of the juniors. The Sports is another varied ability category, with a number of competitors from other sports as well as roadies all finding their feet in mountain biking. Also out there are some enthusiastic and experienced part-timers watching for some fun and good competition. There's a women's race in all categories too. In the Sports, Liz Everell led all the way despite an argument with some barbed wire. She eventually pulled clear of second place Tracy Hardcastle to win comfortably. The mud was taking a huge toll on the bikes. The riders' concern was to keep the gears as well as their eyes as clear as possible, but with little success. The conditions meant that the lap times were much longer than expected, so the races were shortened. And in this category, at the start of the season, very few riders know each other. Add to that large helpings of mud, and it becomes impossible to know whether they were lapping or just overtaking each other. And when Alan Ford came over to win, he went unnoticed, as everyone thought Glenn Turner was still out front. The commentator even proclaimed Glenn the winner as he crossed the line.
Wins in the sports class here today at the surf track. Ladies and gentlemen, is this going to be fair? No, it's not.
In the true spirit of mountain biking, despite acts of God on both bike and weather, most riders were determined to finish.
All the other gear, unfortunately not enough time to repair them.
Whatever.
And that blowout at the back end.
The day's final race had 6 categories, with top category pro elite as well as experts and veterans in both men's and women's classes, though not all starting at the same time. Marin's pro elite women rider Sian Roberts had the advantage of being an ex-fell runner. She took an early lead over Rally's Caroline Alexander, who is one of only 3 pro women mountain bikers. However, a muddily mashed mech soon took Caroline out of contention. And it was Orange's new pro elite rider Janet Wilkinson who took second ahead of a number of better known riders. However, the second woman over the line was expert winner Debbie Thompson from Diamondback. Debbie is also a marathon runner, so she's not adverse to picking up the bike and legging it. In the men's race, David Baker, now riding for Rally, headed the field. With the Peugeots and particularly Tim Gould not racing, the rallies were dominant, with Barry Clark here in second. Since only the best 4 results of 7 races would count towards the riders' final results, some of the top riders could afford to miss 1 or 2 races. They must have been psychic about this one. The Pro Elite category consists of a number of established riders, whereas the expert class is for those still on the way up. such as Carl Sturgeon, who prefers the longer expert courses to the junior ones. As the mud started to dry out, it became even cloggier and riding got harder. However, David remained beautifully fluid both on and off the bike. He used all his cross experience to gradually open up the lead over his teammate. Barry had continued his improvements from the end of last season and was well clear of Dawes' Steve Dowse, who in third was expected to do well on this type of course. Sian had increased her lead to 5 minutes by the time she crossed the line to collect the first winning 16 points of the season, while in the experts Carl had a comfortable enough lead to enjoy himself despite the mud.
Thank you.
So David collected 26 points in his first National Series win since 1988, while fourth place Adrian Timmis allowed one-lapped expert the satisfaction of beating him in the sprint for the line. And Steve Dowse showed his fortunes of war that barbed wire again.
Long after the winners and losers of this event are forgotten, one memory impregnated in the riders' minds, as well as in their kit, is the mud.
Hi, so as promised we said we'd have a look at the bikes that have been raced this year. Let's kick off with Jonathan Watson's Scott Super Evolution. Let's start with the frame. It's a 7000 series aluminium frame, elevated chainstay design that gives loads of mud clearance, especially behind the chainstays. This is especially afforded by the E-stay box section chainstays that offer better stiffness for the rear end and a better heel clearance for the rider. Gearing, standard Shimano, 7-speed, rear end, 12-28 block, 24, 36, 46 chainrings. On odd occasions, Joss put a bigger chainring on for downhill racing. Front end, chrome ollie fork, as standard. Jonathan's also been riding this year the Extra Shock fork, which is a suspension fork from Scott, but it's horses for courses, and sometimes the weight is more critical than the suspension. So at the moment, he's riding the stock fork. Handlebar setup, the bike started life with the SLR Plus system, servo wave brakes and low profile cantilevers. There's a few changes made here through the season, and Jonathan's switched back to top mount shifters, and at the moment he's prototype testing some self-energizing brakes for Scott. These are a little bit more powerful and a bit more responsive than the previous brakes that he had on the bike. Wheels, a very important part of the bike. All the Scott bikes have stainless steel spokes, and we've got good rims on this bike. Joff's been riding the same wheels all year. A lot of people using SPDs now, of course. When he's got muddy conditions and he prefers to use his cross shoes, he'll stick with the standard XT pedal. But for a lot of the season, he's been riding the SPD pedal system from Shimano with the Shimano shoe. The gears and brakes are operated by top rooted cables. So what you've got here is an elevated chainstay bike, lightweight aluminium, race proven.